Hola, bienvenidos. Good morning, ladies and gents. Lovely to see you all here. Wonderful. Oh, that's very kind. Hey, great. Thank you so much for joining us bright and early. Nice to see you all observing social distancing. That's great. We like to keep ourselves. We run a tight ship here at IBTM World. We've got a fantastic program for you here today in the Knowledge Theatre at IBTM World. My name's Oisín Lunny. I'm an event MC, a podcast host for Fortune 500 companies, and an occasional journalist and some other bits and pieces. If you'd like to connect on LinkedIn, please feel free to do so or come up and say hi afterwards. Okay, so isn't it amazing to be here at an actual physical event after many months of doing Zoom calls, of doing virtual events? We're all here in the real world, ready to connect, ready to do business, ready to plan for an exciting 2022 and ready to learn. And we're gathered here in the Knowledge Theatre, and this morning is brought to you by the wonderful people at Thinking Heads. We have Ben Myatt in the front row. Can we have a round of applause for Ben Myatt, please? A wonderful man, right? And Ben can actually work magic. He can bring some of the world's biggest names to your event. People like Richard Branson, who I'm sure many of you have heard from. People like Yuval Noah Harari, perhaps one of the most important thinkers of the 21st century. Folks like Malala, folks like Guy Kawasaki. You can go and visit Thinking Heads at Stand A12 and talk to them about getting some absolute megastars for your event. Think about what an event means to your audience. Think about what it means in terms of PR, and think about the value that having an A-list speaker would add to your event in 2022 or beyond. So do go and chat to Ben, visit Thinking Heads at Stand A12 and see what an absolute A-list speaker can do for your lineup. Now, speaking of which, we are very glad to have one of the rising stars of the Thinking Heads roster joining us here this morning. And she is going to give a fantastic presentation all about you think you know your business, but you don't. Taking the fear out of digitization. Okay, I mentioned digitization when we started here. The future is undoubtedly hybrid, but the question is, how can you leverage digitization in the right way to make your events fly? And we're going to learn all about that today. Now, the digitization of event must be considered really at all levels in order to feel connected to the participants. How does the digitization process affect the events industry? How can we adapt to keep up with new ways of working? You're going to find out why we should make our business decisions using data analysis and looking at how we can optimize the user experience of events by using technology. This session is packed full of useful information that you are going to be able to deploy in all of your events moving forward. And our next speaker, Alba del Villar Olano, is an absolute expert in the field. She's participated as a speaker in more than 20 international conferences in the US and Europe, mostly with advanced technical English, as you will find out soon. She's founded and directed different digital projects, such as the mobile application Thinger, which is a C2C app, the marketplace Thinger Prime, which is B2C, and the strategic consultancy Olano Digital. Since 2019, she is a visiting professor at the University of Navarra and has worked as an external consultant for several leading companies in Spain. According to the expert herself, most companies have data, but they don't know how to get the most out of it. And that's what you're going to learn here today. So she is able to transmit and communicate an analytical vision of all the parties involved in a digital product, both the technical requirements and the go-to-market strategy. She passionately explains how to use lean and agile methodologies based on the scientific method, as well as the use of Google Analytics or Data Studio to plan and optimize campaigns with Google Ads and Facebook ads. Thanks to her long experience with e-commerce, Alba will highlight the main advantages and disadvantages of it, and in addition can explain how to design an online store or an app taking into account organic and paid traffic. Now today, according to Alba, technology and the availability of data make it possible for companies to be more effective and make more efficient decisions, moving away from intuition and towards the scientific method. And this is where Alba offers a unique profile. In 2019, she obtained a doctorate in economics with outstanding cum laude after completing a research stay at the prestigious Columbia University and New York, where she also met the Nobel Prize winner, Joseph Stiglitz. Okay, so Also, if you want to interact with our session, if you've got questions for Alba, we have a wonderful piece of technology called Slido. Just head over to slido.com, and while Alba is speaking, you can put your questions into Slido, and they will be transmitted down here to me at the stage, and we can chat about them afterwards. Or you can come and stand at that microphone, ask your questions to Alba afterwards. Or you can scan that QR code, get Slido on your phone, ask the questions, and then Alba would be happy to answer them after this presentation. So I just want to say thanks to all of you for coming here this morning. My name's Oisín Lunny. Please feel free to share your love for our wonderful opening keynote speaker by using the hashtag IBTM World. Do tag IBTM events, and don't forget to come and say hi to the wonderful people at Thinking Heads at Stand A12 during your visit. So ladies and gentlemen, I want you to give a very warm IBTM World welcome to our first superstar keynote speaker. Please welcome to the stage, Alba del Villar Olano. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oisín, for your kind introduction. I would like to thank the organizers for making this session possible, and I would like to thank Ben for counting with me for this session. Also, I would like to thank the audience for coming here today to the very first session of the Congress. So, in the digitalized world that we live in today and that we depend on, a sea of data is generated every single minute. This data contains patterns that can be converted into information, and this information can actually give you valuable insights. Over the first minute of my presentation, about 5 million YouTube videos will be watched. More than 50,000 pictures will be posted on Instagram, and about 500,000 tweets will be posted in Twitter. But still, some firms and some businesses are quite afraid of this digital world. Why is that? Well, they may be afraid because the enemy can reach them, because some technologies can actually substitute your business, because some digital technologies actually perform better than human beings. And some disruption and disruptive firms, they're actually changing your whole sector. So why are they afraid of this digital world? Why do they keep doing the same things they've always done and hope for something to change? Well, the reason behind this fear is that they're basically incapable of changing. They refuse to change at the individual level, both the way they think and the way they work. But they also refuse to change the way they do business, the organizational and the processes. The key point here is not about seeing digitalization as the enemy. It's not about doing the same things to wait for something to change. It's about doing things differently so we can actually see different results. It's about taking the full opportunity of digitalization and the digital process to implement it into our companies and businesses and making as a new source of competitive advantage. Let me stop first before I start the session and make sure that everybody understands the difference between a digital technology, digitalization, and the digital process. Basically, digital technology is just the representation of data, of information in bits. This technology has allowed us to reduce both the storage, the transmission, and the communication of data. Well, you just have to see my cell phone today. I have this smartphone with 120 gigabytes today, and actually my first laptop back in 2008, it had only 30 gigabytes. This is an example of a digital technology. Second, digitalization is something else. Digitalization means that we're actually using these digital technologies to make our business to improve, to make them more profitable. Let me give you a very easy example. If I have this handwritten document and I scan it into a PDF file, I'm using a digital technology. If I now take this PDF that it's been scanned and I upload it into the cloud and I share it with my team, That would be an example of digitalisation. But the next step, the next natural step is actually digital transformation. This is the process in which we put digital technologies at the core of our business. This is the process in which we change the way we do business around using digital technologies and data. Keeping with the PDF example, it would be not only to upload it into the cloud and share it with my teams, it would be actually to analyze what's written in the PDF and make sense of it, and make decisions out of it. And it's right here in this digital transformation process where disruption is taking place, where firms and startups are actually disrupting your sector or your industry. Because digital transformation profoundly changed the way we do business, the way industries and markets work, and the way consumers behave around the world. And it's right here what I want you to take your business to the next level, which is implemented the full digital transformation. You may be already thinking about what's the role of data in all this. Well, data is the lifeblood of the digital transformation, is at the core, is the heart of the digital process. It's not about having 5 million YouTube videos. It's not about having half million tweets on Twitter. It's actually about knowing what to do with this data. It's about making sense of the data that we already have. It's about making optimal decisions for our business using data. And I'm going to prove this sentence by using a very simple example that I also use with my second-year students at the university. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to remember this data set. This data set is actually quite simple. It contains numbers from 1 to 9, as you can see, and they are attached to different geometrical figures. After that, I will give you another 10 seconds to write the following number, and you just have to give me what are the geometric figures attached to each one of these numbers. Are you ready? So let's start. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Are you ready to write at least some of those numbers? Come on, I'm giving you the first tip and the second tip. I'm giving you the number 2 and the number 8. Can you guess some of this? Do I have somebody in the audience that knows all of these figures? I guess not, because it's kind of hard. It's not easy. It's not easy to remember this data set. Let me rearrange this data set by introducing one simple thing. I'm just going to change the order. And I will ask you to do the same thing. And you will see how easier it is now. Now I'm going to give you another 10 seconds. Will you be able to write that number now? If I come back in 2 years, will you be able to remember this data set? Not the data that it contains, but the pattern that you can actually learn from this data set. This is the magic of finding patterns in data. And this is one of my goals today. Actually, I was not quite surprised because I was expecting this data. But I found out that 34% of the event organizers, they do have data, but they don't know what to do with it. They say they don't have the resources to analyze it or to use it in a meaningful manner. And this is a real lost opportunity for all of you. Because at the end of the day, 36% of these organizers, they have all these data sets, but they're not making any sense of it. My goal here is to actually give you the roadmap so you can actually make sense of your data set and you can actually understand, obtain valuable information so you can actually make decisions out of it. So, in today's session, I'm going to answer 3 questions that I believe you're interested in when we talk about data and digitalization process. First of all, I would like to answer how to use data in a smart way. Second, how you can actually learn about your business using data. And finally, I will draw some conclusions on the opportunities and the threats of the industry, of the events industry. Let me start by the origin of knowledge creation, so I can answer the first of the questions that I have just posed. Why do I care about the origin of knowledge creation? Well, it is true that for some of your firm problems and business concerns, there is no information available. There is nothing you can read and learn about your very specific problems. And this is the point in which you actually shift from being a knowledge consumer to a knowledge producer. How do you make up this transition? How do you go from consuming knowledge to actually producing new knowledge? This is the process of knowledge creation. And I'm going to tell you a very old method that it works nowadays in the most successful startups and firms, such as Amazon or Google. This is the scientific method. However, many historians believe, well, they have stated that the origins of the scientific method, it goes back to this amazing and beautiful book, the Book of Optics. This is the very first evidence for the full framework so we can actually apply the scientific method. However, there are some physical evidence on Egyptian papyrus that actually show some evidence of the scientific method 2,000 years before Christ. What is the scientific method? Well, it is a critical framework that it basically consists in 3 different parts. In general, the first part is basically we have to observe some facts, we have to think about some problems, and we narrow it into asking questions. Once we have posed the key question that we try to answer, we go to the next step, and we use the data toolbox. We will create hypotheses, we will collect the data, and we'll create experiments so we can actually validate or reject each one of the hypotheses that we have posed in the first place. In the third step, we will analyze the data. We will analyze the information we have obtained previously, and we will learn. We will obtain insights. And if we do this in the correct way, more questions will arise. And if that happens, you go back to the first point. You go back to the first step. And this is exactly telling you that this is a circular process in which you go back to the first step over and over again. Let me describe in detail each one of these steps. Let's talk about the explicit problem. We all start by having a general problem, but we have to narrow it by making specific questions. And in here, as I always tell my students, it's very easy to get 100 random and easy questions. What is not easy is to actually come up with the question, with the relevant question. And in here, I'm going to quote Albert Einstein. He would say, if I had 1 hour to solve a problem, I will actually take 55 minutes to think about the problem, and then the next 5 minutes, I will think about solutions, because if I really get the problem correctly, then the solutions will naturally come. So this very first step, it's probably the most important. So you can get the right question and deliver the whole method trying to answer the relevant question. And the second step, we have to use this data toolbox. As I already mentioned, each question will be transformed into an hypothesis. In order to test each one of the hypotheses, we need data. And in here, there are two options, basically. You may have this data, you may not have it. If you have this data, you're fine. If you don't have it, you create it. And there are basically two ways of creating data. You can use theoretical models, or you can use empirical models. If you use a theoretical model, a mathematical model, a human behavior model, you can simulate the behavior and you can create simulated data. So you can learn. But I understand this may be too complex for the business. Let's go to the other method of creating data, using experiments. You can create your own experiment and obtain data that later you can analyze. When I talk about experiments, I'm not talking about being super creative and being innovative. No, no, no. And I'm not either talking about experiments that they are conducted in a lab with test tubes. No. An experiment is a framework that allows you to separately identify the causal effect of one variable into the other one. I'm talking about experiments that you can actually create using LinkedIn ads for 15 days. Once you have collected all these data you also may know that has two different types. It may be quantitative or it may be qualitative. At this time, we can collect both types of data. And here, in the data toolbox, I also want to give you a very visual example. It may be silly, but it's actually very visual. Because it's very important that we select the right tools when we want to answer each specific question. Tools are great if we know how to use them. So I always ask my students, so do you think that thermometer is a good tool? Is it a good tool, a thermometer? And everybody's like, yeah, why not? Yes, it is actually a very good tool. Well, it depends. If I'm actually conducting an experiment on students' performance, because I am actually researching about the problem on how screens affect students' performance. And my specific hypothesis is this one, H1, hypothesis 1, sorry. Large screens increase my students' performance. That's my question. Now, what's the experiment I'm going to do? Or what's the tool I'm going to use? I'm going to use a thermometer to measure data in the classroom. That's definitely not a good tool. It's going to bias all my results. The thermometer may be good just for measure the temperature in the room, but not to measure the size of the screen. It's actually the worst tool ever when you try to measure size, right? Same thing happens when you talk about your business. If you're using the wrong tool, you may obtain wrong results, and you may actually make wrong decisions. Finally, the solution. This is the third step. In here, we have already collected all this data, and now we have to use quantitative or qualitative methods to analyze what's in it, mostly statistical or comparative statistics. You will draw conclusions, and you will learn insights. And it's right here, as I already mentioned, in which you will have more questions and you have to go back to the first step. In fact, this is the point of the learning process. And let me show you the non-linear relationship between what you think you know and what you actually know. So at the beginning of each process, you may think you learn something, you may think you know something, but the truth is you don't. You only learn something at this stage, when you stop and think, when you stop and analyze the problem that you're trying to answer. It's only then when you truly increase what you actually know. And then it will come one day that you will think that you know a lot. But the truth is, you don't. Only when you stop and think, and when you start thinking about the problem, you will soon realize, oh, okay, I may not know that much. And only until you finish with analyzing the problem, you actually learn. And this is how you actually learn and how you actually know things from your business. So why is this important for you? Well, I'm basically telling you a way to make decisions based on facts. We have to go beyond intuition, beyond personal guts, because now we have all this framework, we have all this data available, we can create this data so we can make our decisions based on facts. Moreover, not only we should base our decisions on facts, but we should actually analyze our demand side of our business. We should not focus that much on the product, on the supply side. We need to know who's our user, who's our client, and why they're actually using our products or services. And this makes sense. Why? For so many years, all the industries, all the companies, they just have put the focus on the product, on the supply. Well, if you go from Ricardian models of comparative advantage to Michael Porter, 5 forces, you will see that all these theories, they're all thinking about the product. How can we make our product cheaper? How can we reduce the production cost? And this is what we've been doing. You can see that it's been a huge decline in the production, in the cost of production. Behind this way of thinking, we have the so-called waterfall methods. These waterfall methods are a linear strategy, a linear way of thinking, centered in the product, product-based, supply-based. Once you have obtained the product requirements, you go on design, development, and finally, you put the product into the client. It's all, 75% of the process is just about product. But if we are to apply the scientific method to the way we do business, our strategy should not be linear. Remember, it was circular. It has to somewhere, somehow, go back to the first step. And this is actually how we represent a very well-known methodology, which is the lean startup thinking. Lean startup thinking is a circular methodology with different steps that basically recall to the scientific method. Because we go from an observation to making questions, building hypotheses, collecting data, analyzing, drawing conclusions, and including these conclusions into our process. In fact, the key difference between these two ways of thinking, these two methodologies, it's this one, the client feedback. In Waterfall, you don't care about client feedback. In lean thinking, client feedback is at the center of the methodology. You deliver the MVP, the minimal viable product. You put it out there, you test it, you collect feedback, you optimize your product. You test it again, you collect feedback, and you optimize your product. That's a circular strategy. Why is this important? Why am just talking about demand, client, users, behavior? Well, because if you don't do that, you're just missing at least 50% of the story. Not to say the whole story. Or you're probably getting the whole story wrong. If we want to get the story right, you have to focus on your client. You need to understand why they use you. And some of the questions you need to answer are the following. Why does your client use your product or service? Why people go to your events? Why do you go to events? What are the main problems that your product is actually trying to solve? What are the main problems behind your event that your event uniquely solves? Nobody else can do that way. This is the whole point between value added. We have to add value for our clients so they can choose our solution instead of others. Could you tweet? And when I mean tweet, it's a very one single sentence. Could you tweet, what's the value added for your service or product? What does it make your conference to be unique? Your event to be unique? Nobody else can say this tweet. You're the only one that can say that. Can you actually know this? Do you know this about your business? I guess it takes time to actually answer this type of questions. Why? Why this happens? Well, we can now use data. Data we didn't have before. In this graph, I want to remark two highlights. The first one, the rate of growth of data storage worldwide is exponential. You just have to look at the amount of data we had worldwide 30 years ago and the amount of data we already have in 2007. The amount of data we guess, this is all estimations, we estimate to have today and how much this is going to rise in the next 10 years. It is exponential. Second highlight, this data, it was actually analog, but it's now digital. And this data, it's now IP-based. Now we all have IPs, and that means most of this data is user-based. We now have a lot of data that is user-based. And that allows us to understand new patterns that we never had before. We not only have all this new data, this data sea that is huge, but now we can learn new insights that we didn't know before because we just couldn't analyze before. It is the first time we have all this data, ever. So let me just mix these two plots. The red plot in which I demonstrate that the huge decline in production costs, and then I'm going to merge it with the plot showing the exponential growth on data storage around the world. I can use this to explain the death of supply-side companies and the rise of user-based companies. I can use this plot to show you the death of taxis, the rise of Ubers. I can use this plot to show you why thinking about product encyclopedias, it's declining, but Wikipedias are actually rising. When you think about product, you're not going to grow. If you think about users, All these products, all these firms are user-based. And this is a very nice way to explain why some companies, some industries, they're just falling. And some others, they're just rising. So the key point here is actually to gain competitive advantage on the supply side, on the demand side, not on the supply. There are many ways to gain competitive advantage by analyzing your users and optimizing your product to target those users. So you may be already thinking, okay, how do I do this? How do I know more about my clients? I'm going to give you different tools that I use and that you should be using if you want to learn more about your clients. The buyer persona. If you are to know about your users, you need to define and profile each one of them. And when I talk about profiling, please, let's go beyond marketing 101. Let's go beyond demographics. We don't care about the age, the civil status, the education level of these people. We do care about the psychographic, and we do care about the behavior. When I talk about psychographic, I am talking about inspirations, motivations, fears, the triggers of human behavior. You do not behave because you're 25. You act because you have fear. You act because you have inspirations, because you're motivated. And this is what we need to know about our customers, our clients, about our users. Actually, a great worrisome example of this is Cambridge Analytica and US elections with Trump. They forgot about demographics, and they just use personality types and psychography to target and to identify the message that they were going to convert all the people. And they did it in a very good way, although their results. And the last point is behavior. Each one of these profiles behaves in a different way. And we need to know that. And this is done in the conversion funnel. The conversion funnel is for you to understand the behavior of each one of these buyer personas. Before people actually buy the ticket, which is at the end of this inverse triangle, they do a lot of things before they actually go and buy the ticket. And this is what you need to know. You need to know. You need to know what do they do, how do they obtain information about the event industry, how do they actually realize that they need to go to the event, how do they compare different events, what are the attributes for them to compare events and actually select one of those events. In these areas, in these stages, they will already have selected at least 3 to 4 events. How do you make them to select your event? And moreover, how do you make them to repeat and come back next year? Because that's probably most important, to increase repetition rather than acquiring new customers. This tool is essential for you to understand what they do in each one of the different stages. And if you do this analysis, you will already know what to do on the go-to-market strategy. Because you will know what channels, what messages, what everything, so you can capture these people. There are many other tools that you can actually use. The buyer persona and the conversion funnel are related to the go-to-market strategy. But you can also you should design products based on what users do. And I'm going to give you another 2 tools here. First one is basically tracking individual behavior. The same way we do in websites, I can actually record what each individual user is doing in my website, and I will know 2 things, basically. What do they do most often, and errors and things that they don't go as I thought they go. This is basically a video telling me what this user has done. The individual track. And for events, you have to use these things. You need to know what individuals do within each one of, I'm talking about offline events. Of course, and virtual events too, but this is more for offline events. You can actually track what they do, so you can actually see the good things and the bad things from your event. Second, heat maps. I'm sure you all know what this is, but this heat map, it's basically going to tell you in this very easy colored map, it's going to tell you the places or the locations in which more users were, and those places and those locations that people just don't go. Cold places and hot places. We do this a lot in websites and mobile apps. For example, here, of course, I know that this button is actually clicked by 95% of the people. This one is not that much. Actually, the first third of my website, it's going to see by 75% of the people. The last part of my website, it will be seen by 1% of my people. So the way I rank the information, it's key, because the order matters. Same thing for events. For this event, do you know what stand is actually getting the most affluence? Do you know some cold spots that people, for some reason, they just don't go? It could be actually very interesting to see all these things so we can design the next event. But it's not just by seeing this thing and making decisions out of this. There is also a roadmap to make decisions and use data. It's not about saying, OK, this stand got the most affluence, we have to put it next year. No. You need to give me specific goals and a specific key performance indicators. Again, this is not about intuition. Oh, yes, because I saw there was a lot of people here, we have to increase the size of this spot next year. No. It's about saying, OK, 30% more people came to this spot because we had this very specific message, and we actually tested. You had 2 different tests, and you can actually compare this data. Let me give you a very fast and easy example of this whole process. Let's assume that we found out that one of our value differentials from our customers is actually the quality of the people that come to my event. In that case, I want to know how to increase the quality of the attendees for my event, right? So after doing some research, I will actually draw 2 profiles, 2 buyer persona profiles of potential attendees for my event. In the second step, I will use LinkedIn during 15 days to draw this experiment. I will target these 2 different buyer personas with the same message, the same image, the same everything, call to action, the same everything, but the only difference is actually the buyer persona. And remember, these buyer personas, the difference is not the age or the civil status. The difference between these 2 buyer personas is their motivation and the inspirations. Once I have set this in LinkedIn, I may use 1,000 euros, you don't need more, and you run it for 15 days. After 15 days, 1 month, you analyze this data and you realize that there are some differences. How do you make decisions? Well, before we even launched this experiment, we were actually interested in this key performance indicator. We want to know how many of the users actually spend more than 30 seconds in my ticket page. And you can actually see that this is a very specific goal that I can measure quantitatively. Not only who goes to my website and see the ticket price, but those that they actually stay more than 30 seconds. I'm not measuring this activity by purchases. It would be a wrong tool leading to wrong results. That's why I'm going a step before purchases in the conversion funnel. After I have compared this data and I actually see, okay, this buyer persona does stay longer in the ticket page, and the percentage of user coming from this campaign is actually higher. It's actually 20% higher than the other buyer persona. Now, I can take this decision and I can say, okay, our go-to-market strategy is going to focus on this buyer persona and not the other one. I could do the same for a product design example, but it's just to obtain the same framework, okay? Problem, data tool, and analysis. Finally, I wanted to go over some of the opportunities and threats of the sector. Basically, if I was to take the 5P of Porter to analyze the degree of competence in the sector, I have to say it's moderate. And if you analyze each one of these 5 forces, you will realize data and digitalization are part of this moderate competitive degree. Basically, you can use these tools and this data and this lean thinking to design your products and to create differential products. You can actually use these things, this roadmap, to optimize your go-to-market strategies, not to lose that much money, and to actually target the users for which you're increasing the value that will definitely convert more, engage more, and give you a higher profits. On the administrative, definitely, you can use a lot of digital tools to improve the way you communicate with your peers, with your clients, with your employees, to increase employees' productivity. There are so many tools out there just to improve all these things. And finally, economic. I'm not even paying attention to economic because it's just intuitive to see if we make smart use of data, we optimize profits. That means we increase profits. We reduce costs, we increase revenue, our profits are higher. And finally, making the advantage of this digital transformation can give you 2 new sources, totally new sources of internationalizing. You can actually penetrate the market or diversify the market by using hybrid events. And that's basically everything I wanted to say today. If there is one thing you should take from this session, is actually to see your business through the lens of lean thinking. This would be my present for you, to give you this lens to see every single problem as an opportunity to learn and to improve. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful stuff there. Thank you so much, Alba. That was great. So much good stuff in there. I've been a professor of UX-driven business from time to time, and there was so much brilliant stuff there. The KPIs, buyer personas, conversion funnels, A/B testing, data-driven decision-making, absolutely wonderful. So we're kind of coming up to 10 o'clock, so I just wanted to ask you one question here, which I think is going to be on everyone's minds. Now, you spoke about the importance of data-driven decisions. Where, for event organizers, do you think the data comes from? What are some of their sources they should be looking at?
All right. Actually, I prepared a backup slide for.
Oh, awesome.
There are many, many data sources that you can take different from regular business. Of course, you can do questionnaires, pre, inside, and post questionnaires. But you can also do focus groups and offline surveys right here at the moment the event is taking place. Also, you can create, most of you may have this event app. From this event app, you can capture all the human behavior from your attendees and from both sides. people that they're offering services and people that they're actually coming to your event. You've got a lot of disruption in registration tools. I'm sure in 5 years we'll come to IBTM and we'll have these visual recognitions. We don't need these things no more, okay? We don't have to do these things. We will have to be recognized by our faces, probably. Interactive screens, you can actually use these interactive screens to mix offline and online and take offline human behavior and put it directly into online tools. And finally, wearable tech and e-beacons that they're quite used in this industry.
Amazing. And I noticed you have some other slides there. Do you want to go super quickly through them so folks can maybe take a photograph? Is there other information that you want to share?
Yes, because I thought that some of you may actually wondering, okay, yes, but I need the specific roadmap. What do I have to do in the next 2 weeks? What do I have to research about? Well, there are basically 2 things you have to do research about. To find out whether your product has an opportunity, and to find out whether your business has an opportunity. If you want to do user research to find out whether your product has an opportunity, you'll have to delineate on the things that I have just mentioned. Buyer profile, conversion funnels, KPIs. If you want to analyze whether your business has these opportunities or not, you need to do some internal and external analysis, the typical SWOT analysis. I really like this tool, which is the cage distance analysis, that it doesn't only look into economic, but cultural, geographical, and administrative distance between you and your competence. And the TAM sum, and at the end of the day, the value differential analysis, it may be 2 variables, 3 variables, n variables, but you need to find out what's your value added in the industry.
Fantastic. So folks, take a photograph of this slide because there's so much goodness in there. And will you be able to share this deck with people who want?
Sure. I have no problems on sharing this with you. The organization will let you know.
Wonderful.
Sure.
So if you want to book Alba for your event, if you want to get a copy of that incredibly valuable slide deck, just go and speak to Alba afterwards. Come and say hi. By all means, come and visit the nice people at Thinking Heads. You met Ben Myatt earlier. They are at stand A12. You can find out how to book rock star speakers like Richard Branson, Yuval Noah Harari, Malada Guy Kawasaki, and Alba del Villar Olano for your next event. You heard about the differentiator. What's going to make your event special in one tweet? One answer could be booking some amazing speakers, and I hope that you do. I wish you the best of luck with your events, and I'd like you to join me in thanking Alba for that amazing speech, and thank you all so much for coming. Alba, thank you for that great speech. That was awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Okay, folks, so Alba mentioned the app there, the event app, the importance of the event app. Do download the IBTM World Event app. Do make sure to use this amazing in-person, face-to-face opportunity to make some connections to supercharge your events and your business for 2022. Now, we are going to have to ask you to vacate the room because we're doing a little clean. We do take hygiene and our kind of security very seriously here. So thank you so much for joining us. My name's Oisin Lunny. I'll see you at the Thinking Head stand. Feel free to connect online. Thank you so much for joining us.